So if you recently saw our Flip 5 video where I tried to switch from my iPhone 14 to the Flip 5, I mentioned, now although I'm not ready for a flip phone just yet, it doesn't mean that I'm not ready for Android. And it doesn't really get much more Android than the Pixel 8 Pro. This is Google's newest flagship, and I'm sure you're aware it's probably one of their best devices. Now, I've had some experience with Pixel devices in the past, and they've always been one of my favorites. I had the first ever Pixel. In fact, I pre-ordered that device. And one of my favorite phones I've ever owned was my Pixel 3 XL. Now, when I got that Pixel 3 XL, the Pixel 4 was actually out. And even though it was a year old, it was still extra fast, and because it ran stock Android, I ran into no issues while using it. That's something I've always loved about Pixel devices, and I'll get into that a little bit more later. Now, let's start off with what I thought when unboxing the Pixel 8 Pro. Now, when I first unboxed the Pixel 8 Pro, I was pretty amazed. It is one nice looking phone, especially in the bay blue that we have here. It's got this lovely matte finish on the back, similar to what my iPhone 14 Pro does, and then it has these nice shiny rails, again similar to what my iPhone has. So I was definitely used to this sort of design, but in true Pixel fashion, you've got this camera bar at the top. I've actually always liked this camera bar. When it first came around on the Pixel 6, I didn't think it looked ugly at all. I much prefer it to the cluster of cameras that you get on Samsung devices and iPhones for that matter. Now, a few things I like about the Pixel's design is that because they have this camera bar on the back, when you rest it on a table, it doesn't actually rock side to side. Compare this to my iPhone, and yeah, you can see why that can get annoying. What I like about the Pixel 8 as well, compared to say the 7, is that this year the camera bar just smooths into the side that little bit nicer. Now, the Pixel 8 Pro is slightly bigger than the iPhone 14 that I was using. Not by much, but I still found it to be a little bit cumbersome. I really wish that they had sort of all the 8 Pro's colors and features, but just in a smaller form factor, rather than having the Pixel 8 and then a Pro version with more. I think that's something that Apple have nailed, that you can get the Pro version, but in the smaller size. Now, moving on to that display, there was absolutely no faults that I found when comparing it to my iPhone 14 Pro. And while I'm not a Pixel peeper, I definitely found the colors and brightness to be absolutely perfect. Now, on Google's own website, they describe the display as a super Actra display. Now, I think this is just their sort of marketing term of like Retina that Apple uses. And it basically means it's a 6.7 inch display. It has 489 pixels per inch and is an LTPO OLED display. But to cut all the bullshit, it basically means this display is perfect. It also means that it's very nice and smooth to scroll on because it goes up to 120 Hertz. And then because it can also throttle down to just 1 Hertz, it means that it will actually use less battery than some previous generations. The Pixel 8 Pro has 3 cameras on the back. It's got a 50 megapixel wide camera, a 48 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 40 megapixel telephoto lens. Essentially, without getting into the deep details of these cameras, it means that you should be able to cover all 3 focal lengths fairly easily. Again, matching what I had on my iPhone 14 Pro. Now, moving on to the Pixel, I had absolutely no problems with the photos. In fact, I think I prefer the photos coming from the Pixel 8 than I do my iPhone. It always looks just that little bit better. Whether it's skin tones just looking more natural, or the sky and grass just looking more vibrant. It always just seemed to produce a nicer looking photo than the iPhone. This is all down to Google's algorithm. And essentially it's making loads of different adjustments in the background every time you take a photo. This means it doesn't really matter about the specs of the camera on the back, because Google's processing is so good nowadays that you can take a photo that looks pretty meh and they will fix it. Now, during my time with the Pixel 8 Pro, I've only taken a couple of videos. To be honest, I don't take too many videos on my iPhone anyway, so this isn't unusual. The videos look fine to me, and I think they're probably about on par with what Samsung do, and maybe just a tad behind on the iPhone. Honestly, it's not really that much, and personally, I can always tell when someone's used an iPhone or a Pixel or a Samsung to take videos. They just look a little bit flat. Now, coming to the Pixel 8 Pro this year is a load of AI improvements, especially to the camera department. Now, it's always nice to show your friends what Magic Eraser and all these different AI tools do, but to be quite honest, for me, that's had Photoshop and trained on it for years, it really doesn't do much for me. I like that Google are adding these little features and making other generations probably interested in photography and image manipulation. However, for me, it just doesn't really do anything, and I wouldn't be upset if it disappeared tomorrow. Moving on to what my favorite thing about this phone is, stock Android. Now, if you remembered during the Flip 5 review, I sort of had a little dig at Samsung. They tend to add a load of bloatware to a device, which I personally don't agree with. If you've bought a device, especially for around £1,000, you shouldn't have a load of ads or Facebook or other random apps on the device. That's where plain stock Android comes in. You don't have to deal with 3 different browsers or a few different messaging apps. Everything's Google's own, and it's just plugged in right from the get-go. Now that led me to a very nice situation. All I had to do was log into my own Google account, and all my photos, my Chrome tabs, everything were already on the device. That means setting up, even from an iPhone, is so much easier. I have to admit, this is because I already use some of Google's services. So if I was someone that didn't use Google Photos already, I would have that issue. Another nice feature was that without even ticking any boxes or really going into any settings, my Google Calendar entries started to show up here. I believe this part is called At a Glance, and honestly, I really like it. It's a very nice widget that sort of just blends into the background when not needed, but if you've got a meeting coming up, it will change to the meeting title and time. I could not have made this any better if I designed it myself. This is something that iPhones will always lack, in my opinion. While they do actually have widgets now, just not mature enough. Google and Android have had widgets since the beginning, and it's something I always envy when seeing people with Android phones. My widgets are big blocks and they honestly look very ugly in comparison. Now, there's probably loads of other things on stock Android that I'm missing. However, all I will say is that I didn't really miss iOS that much. There was a couple of times that my friends wanted me to airdrop something, but most of the time I didn't have any problems and it just worked. Now, on battery life, the Pixel 8 Pro has a 5050 mAh battery. I honestly haven't had too many problems with the battery life. What I notice is that it fast charges very nicely, so even if I am low on battery, I can just quickly plug it in and get about 50 to 30% very easily. It also has fast wireless charging and battery share. For me though, I can easily get through a day with this battery. I've never come into any problems, and when I did, it fast charged anyway. It was nice being able to charge my AirPods at a pinch using the battery share feature, something that iPhones still don't have. And although it only really came in handy once, it's still better than not having it at all. Now, a few of the things that I've really enjoyed about switching to the Pixel 8 Pro is, well, just the Google ecosystem. So having Google Assistant on my phone was a breath of fresh air. Honestly, when it compares to Siri, it's just night and day. Now, the Pixel 8 Pro definitely has loads of features that are probably not really explored, but there's definitely a few things that are a bit gimmicky. So for instance, you can create AI wallpapers, something that sounds good, and again, it's fun to show off when you're at the pub, but realistically, you're just going to put a wallpaper of something you like or a photo that you've taken. What I do really like, especially about the Pixel program, is the fact that you get 7 years of software updates with the Pixel 8 Pro. So this is going to be guaranteed to be kept up to date with security updates and software updates until October 2030. Now, the other thing that's not obviously exclusive to the Pixel 8 Pro, but is something that I really appreciated coming from my iPhone 14, was the inclusion of a fingerprint sensor. Although I really appreciate that the camera and Face ID on the Pixel is fantastic, it's just sometimes really nice to use the fingerprint reader when you don't want to actually look at your phone. It's especially useful when I'm wearing sunglasses and other things where my iPhone doesn't actually register and I have to do the awkward raise of the glasses so it'll unlock the phone. Now, something that Android users always bang on about to me is the fact that Android is customizable. And it definitely is. If you want to sit there for hours on end customizing your phone so it's absolutely perfect for you, you can do that. However, for me, I just like changing the accent colors so it matches my wallpaper. I'm never one to sit there and customize my phone hours on end. But I appreciate that the phone does that. So, my final thoughts on the Pixel 8 Pro. Honestly, I've really enjoyed my experience with it. If I was going to move to Android, this would be the phone for me. I think it's fantastic. Its hardware and software is honestly incredible, and there's not really much stopping me from moving. The one thing though that is going to keep me on iPhone is the Apple Watch. Now, although I'm not wearing it at the moment, I'm definitely someone that can't seem to live without my Apple Watch. I've tried to switch to Garmin, I've even tried the Pixel Watch in the past, but there's just something that draws me back into the Apple Watch. I think if Google had maybe a Pixel Watch Ultra that was a bit more rugged and, I don't know, had a better battery life, I'd probably be inclined to try it. But at the moment, I think I'm probably going to stick with Apple just due to the Apple Watch. If you've enjoyed this video, remember to drop us a like and subscribe. Plus, if you want to see our other videos on cases and screen protectors, they'll be linked below too.